I've always been surrounded with music. It's something that gives me joy. It's something I want to do for the rest of my life. Living a balanced life and take them with me into the future.
For years, one video seemed to define an entire generation's introduction to street music. A small girl standing on a sidewalk in Santa Monica, violin tucked under her chin, drawing a crowd that grew by the minute. That girl was Karolina Protsenko, and for the better part of a decade, her name was almost synonymous with viral violin covers. Then, sometime in 2025, longtime fans noticed something odd. The upload slowed. The style changed. A new name, Karolina Rose, started appearing across the social channels. Comment sections filled with a familiar question: what really happened to her? The answer isn't a scandal, a disappearance, or a tragedy. It's a story about growing up in public, and about an artist choosing, quite deliberately, to become someone new. This is the real account of how a street performer built an empire, and why she eventually stepped away from the name that made her famous. Karolina Protsenko was born on October 3, 2008, in Kiev, Ukraine, into a household where music wasn't a hobby but a shared language. Her father, Nikolai, played guitar. Her mother, Ella, played piano and sang. Before Karolina could read sheet music, she was absorbing rhythm and melody simply by existing in a home where instruments were always within reach. In 2015, when Karolina was 6 years old, the family relocated to California, settling eventually in Simi Valley, in Ventura County. It was around this time that she picked up the violin for the first time, beginning formal lessons and classical training almost immediately after the move. Unlike many child prodigies who are pushed toward an instrument by ambitious parents, accounts of Karolina's early years describe a child who gravitated toward the violin on her own, encouraged but not forced. She trained under classical instructors, building the kind of technical foundation that would later let her tackle everything from film scores to chart-topping pop songs with apparent ease. But for the first couple of years in the United States, she was simply a kid taking lessons, nothing that suggested the scale of what was coming. The real turning point arrived in the summer of 2017. Karolina, then 8 or 9 years old, brought her violin to the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica, one of the busiest pedestrian corridors in Southern California, filled with tourists, shoppers, and street performers competing for attention. Busking is a tough environment for anyone, let alone a child barely old enough to be in the 3rd grade. But something about the way she played, technically precise, yet emotionally unguarded, stopped people in their tracks. Passers-by began recording her on their phones. Small crowds turned into larger ones. Some of those bystander videos found their way onto YouTube and Facebook, and within those platforms' algorithms, Karolina's performances started to travel. Her parents, who had initially been cautious about her performing in public, watched the reaction shift from curiosity to genuine affection, and gradually leaned into supporting her budding career. By December 2016, she had already launched her own YouTube channel, and after the Santa Monica busking videos began circulating in 2017, that channel had the fuel it needed to grow rapidly. What set her apart from countless other cover artists wasn't just her skill. It was the visible sincerity in her performances, the way she'd close her eyes on a difficult passage or grin at her mother mid-song. Early breakout videos, including a duet with Ella performing Callum Scott's "You Are the Reason" right there on the Santa Monica sidewalk, captured something that felt intimate even though it was being filmed in public. That authenticity became her signature. Over the following years, Karolina's channels expanded into a genuine online music operation. She built a catalog of violin covers spanning pop, rock, classical, and Latin music, everything from Shawn Mendes and Tones and I to Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. Her rendition of Luis Fonsi and Daddy Yankee's Despacito became one of her most watched uploads, and her covers of Dance Monkey and Tom Odell's Another Love spread her name well beyond the United States. She didn't work alone. As her production values improved, she began collaborating with other musicians who added new texture to her sound. Her duets with Italian saxophonist Daniele Vitoli became fan favorites, blending violin and saxophone in a way that felt genuinely collaborative rather than staged. She also built connections with other young performers navigating similar rises to fame, including a memorable pairing with singer Angelica Hale, runner-up on America's Got Talent, with whom she performed Clean Bandit's Symphony. Television exposure accelerated her visibility further. In 2019, she appeared on The Ellen DeGeneres Show, performing a cover of Post Malone's Sunflower for the studio audience. Ellen, visibly taken with her talent, gifted her a custom blue violin and a personalized tip jar for busking, a gesture that became one of the most replayed moments of Karolina's early career. In March 2022, she appeared on The Kelly Clarkson Show, performing a duet of Guardian alongside violinist and YouTube pioneer Lindsey Stirling, an artist Karolina has cited as a major early inspiration for combining classical technique with popular music. By the mid-2020s, the numbers told their own story. Her main channel, Karolina Protsenko Violin, had grown past 8.5 million subscribers, with total views across her platforms climbing past 2 billion. She had followers in more than 50 countries, an active presence on Instagram and TikTok, and music available on every major streaming platform, from Spotify to Apple Music. In 2018, she released her debut collection of violin covers, titled My Dream, and continued building out a catalog of releases in the years that followed. In November 2023, she made her orchestral debut performing with Orchestra Nova LA, and by 2024 she had performed Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto with the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, a serious classical milestone for a performer best known online for pop covers. What made Karolina's story resonate with so many people wasn't only the scale of her audience, but what she chose to do with it. She began using her platform to encourage other young musicians, launching an initiative in 2022 called Play with Karolina, an online contest inviting fans to submit their own cover performances. Hundreds of young musicians. She also used social media, particularly TikTok, to talk more candidly about the pressures of performing and posting online, including moments of frustration or self-doubt after a performance that didn't go the way she'd hoped. That willingness to show an unpolished side of herself, alongside the technical proficiency of her playing, helped her build a following that felt less like distant fans and more like a community. By 2024 and into 2025, longtime followers started to notice subtle changes. Uploads to her violin-focused channel slowed. Her social posts leaned less on instrumental covers and more on songwriting, vocals, and behind-the-scenes glimpses of studio work. Then, on July 14, 2025, Karolina made it official. She announced a new stage name, Karolina Rose, to be used specifically for original music. She explained the choice in fairly simple terms. Rose is her actual middle name, and adopting it gave her a way to mark a new chapter without abandoning the identity she'd built as a violinist. She has described the shift as stepping into her pop girl era, and has noted that a shorter, simpler name would be easier for new listeners to search for and follow compared to Protsenko. The rebrand wasn't a rejection of her past. Her violin channel and its catalog remained intact, and she has continued to perform and post as a violinist. Karolina Rose, by contrast, became the name attached to her original songwriting, vocals, lyrics, and pop production, rather than instrumental covers of other artists' songs. In August 2025, she released her first original single under the new name, a song called Advice, followed by additional original tracks. The response from her existing fan base was largely enthusiastic. Comments on her early original releases described feeling moved by hearing her sing her own words rather than reinterpret someone else's song, with several fans noting how far she'd come from covering hits like Wonderful Tonight to now writing and performing original material. Karolina's transition makes more sense in the context of who she is at this stage of her life. Turning 17 in October 2025, she has spent essentially half her life as a public performer, first as a busker, then as a viral video subject, then as an established YouTube musician with a multi-platform presence. Child performers who build an audience around covering other people's songs often reach a point where they want to establish their own creative voice, not because the cover work was inauthentic, but because 8 years of playing other artists' music is a long time to wait before writing your own. The rebrand also reflects a fairly common pattern among young musicians who start on cover-heavy platforms like YouTube. Lindsey Stirling herself, an artist Karolina has repeatedly cited as an influence, built a career on the same foundation of viral violin content before developing an original discography and stage persona of her own. Viewed that way, Karolina Rose isn't a departure from the path Karolina Protsenko was on. It's closer to a natural next step for it. There's also a practical branding logic at play. Karolina Rose is shorter and easier to search for than Karolina Protsenko, which matters enormously for an independent artist trying to build streaming numbers and playlist placements for original songs in a crowded market. Splitting her identity into two connected but distinct brands, Protsenko for the violin catalog that built her audience, Rose for the pop material she's writing now, lets her keep both audiences engaged without asking longtime fans to abandon the content that brought them to her in the first place. None of this matches the darker theories that circulated when her upload pace slowed. There's no public evidence of her retiring, of a health crisis, of a falling out with her family, or of her stepping away from music altogether. Her parents, Nikolai and Ella, continue to be involved in her career, much as they have been since the Santa Monica busking days. Her younger brothers, Leo and Nicholas, still appear occasionally in family content. As of the information available, she continues to live with her family in Simi Valley, balancing her music career with being a high school student, with her expected graduation around 2026. The vanishing that some corners of the internet speculated about was, in reality, a slower release schedule tied to writing, recording, and preparing an entirely new body of original work, a process that simply takes longer than filming a violin cover of an already existing song. Anyone expecting the exact same upload rhythm from a 14-year-old busker and a 17-year-old singer-songwriter juggling schoolwork was always going to be surprised by the shift. Where Karolina Rose goes from here remains genuinely open. She has an EP's worth of original material out, a fan base that has largely followed her into this new phase, and a violin catalog that isn't going anywhere. Whether she leans further into pop songwriting, returns more frequently to classical or orchestral work, or finds a way to blend all of it together, the foundation she built over nearly a decade of public performance gives her considerably more room to experiment than most artists get at her age. What's clear is that the premise of what really happened to her was always going to have an answer more grounded than the internet speculation suggested. There was no vanishing act, no secret struggle hidden from the public, no abrupt ending. There was a kid who started playing violin on a sidewalk because she loved it, built one of the largest independent music followings on the internet doing exactly that, and then, as she grew into her late teens, decided she had something of her own to say. Karolina Protsenko didn't dissipate. She simply picked up a pen to go along with her bow, and gave herself a new name to match the new songs. For the millions who first found her through a shaky phone video of a 9-year-old playing violin on a California sidewalk, the real story isn't a mystery to be solved. It's a coming-of-age arc playing out in public, one chapter at a time, and by all available evidence, still very much being written.